Welcome back to Pace Law Firm, talking with Julie Entwistle from Entwistle Health Solutions in Ancaster, Ontario. Julie, you recently wrote an article called "The Ethics and Economics of Treatment Denial," made some waves in the OT industry, the occupational therapist industry. What was the article about? Why did you write it?
That's a loaded question. The article was really speaking to some of the issues we're having in the insurance industry right now with respect to getting treatment approved for injured people that really need treatment. So it was a bit of a reaction to an article written by another health professional who spoke about the insurer's role in denying treatment for individuals. And I just took it that one step further and sort of highlighted that it's not necessarily the insurer that's making this decision about whether or not people get treatment. It's really another health professional. And that's an even bigger ethical and economic problem for us in the healthcare field.
I don't know if a lot of people maybe even know that, because we're so used to talking about, like, there's the personal injury firm on the one side with the client maybe, and then there's the insurance companies and maybe even car companies and stuff like that in the news. But we forget that it is, at its core, it's health professionals making judgment calls on people's treatment. Right. Is there an us versus them attitude in the industry, and how did that start?
You know, there really shouldn't be, but I think there is. To be honest, I came into this industry in 2000. And in 2000, it was a much friendlier environment. A lot of times the insurers would ask for us to get involved, recognizing that we had a lot of valuable services to offer injured people. And when you're hired by an insurer, it's a lot easier for them to agree with your opinion and to let you move forward. They wanted your opinion in the first place. And then some significant changes in the industry have happened over the years, and that's really made it more of a litigious environment, necessarily so. And so now it's kind of created this situation where the insurers are entitled to a second opinion, but those second opinions aren't always the best opinions. And it causes a bit of an us versus them, because the treating folk just want to provide treatment. We want to help people. And then you've got people that make their living just doing insurance examinations. And there's a bit of an undertone that the more maybe they deny people services, maybe the more referrals they're going to get.
Now, at the beginning of the article, let's just step back just a little bit.
Sure.
Because it does sound a little bit complicated, maybe to the people that are watching that don't know the industry very well, and hopefully haven't been injured and had to go through it.
Right.
At the beginning of your article, Ethics and Economics of Treatment Denial, you said that it starts with a person that gets injured. So maybe take us through,
Sure.
How does it work when someone gets injured, and when do they meet up with what you call these insurance, what are their IEs and things
Sure.
like that?
Okay. So if you were injured in an automobile accident, I'm going to assume in describing this, you've already had an assessment by an occupational therapist as an example. And that therapist has determined that you would benefit from our treatment, okay, whatever that is. And for us, treatment is helping people to resume those roles that are important to them in their life. So I have to submit a treatment plan to your insurance company, and I have to outline what your injuries are, how you're struggling right now, what your functional goals are. And I have to outline the costs that it would, I will be charging them to provide the services to you to help move forward in these goal areas.
Okay.
Okay. Your insurer gets this treatment plan. They have 10 business days to do one of three things. They can accept the plan and say, Julie, no problem, move ahead. They can partially approve the plan, saying, Julie, I don't think you need 4 visits. I think you can do this in 2. Or they can deny the plan. No, we do not agree to fund those services. When they partially approve the plan or deny the plan, they are supposed to, and there's one loophole, but for the sake of argument, they're supposed to set up an insurance examination. And that's where they go to their vendors list of providers, and they hire someone to come in and basically get a second opinion on what your needs are. Okay.
So that person comes in, does the second opinion on what your needs are.
Right.
And then where does the client, I'm just trying to figure this out, because if you're an occupational therapist, you go in and you say this person needs X, Y, and Z treatment.
Sure.
Now you're saying that another occupational therapist comes in and says, no, they don't need X, Y, and Z treatment. How can there be such a divergent view when they're both occupational therapists, if you follow?
That's my issue, really.
Okay.
And that's one of the challenges that we're having. First thing, it's not always a second occupational therapist, and it should be. It should be profession to profession commenting on the reasonableness of my plan. I expect to have to sell the concept to an insurer. They're not healthcare professionals, so I need to outline what I can really do to help you. but I shouldn't have to sell that to my own profession. They should understand the value of our service, and it should be easy for them to look at your situation and go, wow, Sean's really struggling with this, that, or the other. So therefore, yes, Julie will be able to help him. So, and it's hard because you get two different therapists with two different opinions, and we're all entitled to our own opinion, but we all come into the situation with a different level of experience. And when you provided treatment for as long as some of us have, and you've been doing assessments for as long as some of them have, sometimes I think you can lose sight of the value of what we can offer. And so you may have a therapist with 12 years of experience like myself, whose opinion is being questioned by somebody who is 3 months out of school.
I was going to say, because I was lucky enough to see you speak last month in Hamilton, and you were talking about this very issue. Yeah. Two things I want to cover is, one, I think you had a pretty good example, but we'll get into that in a second. But let's talk about that for a second about are there any background checks on this? Like, when someone comes in and does an insurance exam, like you say, and they only have 3 months, they're just out of school, doesn't that matter? Like, shouldn't that matter?
It really should in some situations. Some files or clients are much more complicated than others, and it takes years of experience to gather the skills necessary to really know how to help those individuals. Brain injury is one. Brain injury is extremely complicated. Spinal cord injury is also complicated. And then there's psychological disability, which can be very difficult as well. So I'm not going to say that newer graduates are not qualified to be rendering these opinions. That may not be the case. It may be very much file specific. I came out of school right into this industry. Now, again, when I came out of school, I provided treatment as well as assessment. So I got to build my assessment skills and my treatment skills at the same time. Unfortunately, some clinicians in our industry, whether they're new graduates, whether they're coming from another province or from another country, they may not have the treatment experience to be commenting on treatment.
You mentioned that in the article, that quite a few of them, and I guess we don't really have hard numbers, but that people should be practicing or doing some clinic work as well as assessing. From the insurance examiner side, is that all they do?
A lot of times, yes. There are people that have different sources of income in this industry. Some of the consultants that work for me provide treatment for me or through my company, but they also provide insurance examination services on the other side. And I think that's a very balanced approach. Okay. And that comment in the article came from the speech therapy profession, where they are trying to sort of mandate as a rule that anybody commenting on a speech therapy treatment plan has to be in the trenches providing treatment, even on a part-time basis, because that's really, really helpful. And it's sort of like, you know, I had another therapist question a treatment plan I had submitted on devices of childcare. And that therapist, you know, admitted to the client she didn't know anything about these devices I was requesting for the client, but still rendered an opinion the client didn't need them.
But how is that even, like...
I know.
How is that even possible?
This is the ethical piece. Really, as a therapist, if I'm provided with a file or a referral for a situation that I really don't have the skills and knowledge to be commenting on, I need to decline that referral. And good therapists will do that. They'll say, you know what, I'm not a brain injury OT. I'm not going to comment on this treatment plan by this experienced brain injury professional. So we need to see more of that. And we need to educate some of the newer people into the industry. Even though we're all registered with the same college, that doesn't mean we have the same skills in our toolbox. And I think that really needs to be highlighted.
Can you, and I'm nervous that this is going to turn into some kind of, we're not trying to bash the insurance industry or the occupational therapists that work for them. In your article, you go on to explain how everyone's doing their job, and it's an important job that they do. Sure. But there was one example that you used, and the one you just gave about the things the woman needed for her child. But what was that example that you used when you were giving your speech, where the person was trying to put the wheelchair into the car or something? Right.
So one of the problems we're seeing quite commonly, unfortunately, with some of these insurance examinations, there can be great insurance examinations, and I still do the odd one. But unfortunately, a lot of times we get this report and we're reading it and it doesn't make logical sense in some areas, or we talk to our client and the client's recall of that experience is very different than what's been reported on. Had another client yesterday, same situation. But the one I was speaking about was a gentleman who had been asked to transfer his wheelchair into a vehicle during an assessment. And he was only able to transfer in the tires. And then the therapist stopped him from transferring in the seat because she didn't want to scratch her car. And yet in the report, it said that he was observed to transfer his wheelchair into her car. it's a small point, but a huge point at the same time, because he didn't transfer his wheelchair. He didn't take the most complicated, awkward, and heaviest piece of his chair and bring it across the vehicle. With someone with a spinal cord injury who has reduced trunk control, that's a very dangerous situation for them to be turning and reaching out of their vehicle. And so she didn't see him complete the process, but yet reported that he did, and then didn't recommend a piece of equipment for him to help with that process. So it was a very concerning situation that, you know, again, when we read these reports, they just need to be right, and they need to be solidly based to have any weight sort of in the industry.
That is very concerning. I mean, can a person have someone there as an advocate to watch the exam take place so that there can be two sides? Or
that's, a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
As an assessing person, I have had clients that have had someone else there, and it generates good discussion. Sometimes that other person provides really valuable information about that person's function. They may be the caregiver, they may be the sibling. We don't have the luxury of knowing people before their accident. So we're supposed to be making decisions on what's different about their life, and yet I didn't know who you were before. So I have to rely on you telling me what you were like before, or going through medical records that have been provided. But when you have a family member or somebody else present, sometimes they can provide that good information. A lot of people are wanting to bring people to assessments, and some assessors, I think, are just refusing to be supervised or observed. Some people have wanted to videotape these sessions, and that may be the way the industry goes, because there's such a disparity between the client's recall of that experience and what this report says. You know, the same thing with the client I saw this week. It was a situation where he'd been asked to go up the stairs, and he army crawls on the stairs. He doesn't negotiate the stairs like the rest of us.
Just using his elbows.
Using one arm and one knee. And the report said he got, he halfway up the stairs using his left arm, but it didn't say army crawl. It didn't say he was on his arms and knees. It implied that he was using a railing like the rest of us. And it's just the way it was worded really skewed it in the favor of him not needing assistance on the stairs.
Like, what are we talking about here? Is this a case of, they're occupational therapists, and like you say, that you came out of school, and respect and trust were the two capital letter words that you're supposed to learn in school when you're becoming an occupational therapist. But is it a case of, look, the insurance company hires this person, they pay their paycheck, and I guess we can't go on the record as saying, because we don't know and we can't paint everyone with the same brush, but why such a disparity all the time?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I should clarify, this isn't just occupational therapy. So this is industry-wide. Some professions are a lot more friendly to their profession than others. Chiropractors they just cut each other up all the time. Psychologists, physios. And OTs have always been pretty supportive, but it seems to be that either they're getting maybe some bad training out of school, maybe some bad management, the company they're working for. Some of the companies aren't run by health professionals. That's not necessarily a terrible thing, but you need health professionals to guide health professionals and to train and mentor them in this industry. To me, it should be client first. Our college requires us to be client first. Right. The tie goes to the runner. This is an individual who, if you're wondering whether they do or they don't need the service, we should really err on the side of caution and provide them with the opportunity to have this service. So it's not just OTs. But I think there is that misconception in some ways that because the insurer denied the plan in the first place, the insurer maybe knows that the person doesn't need the service. So I better agree with this insurer, because if you disagree with the insurer, then that meant the insurer was wrong to deny the plan in the first place. So I think there's a little bit of that going on.
Okay.
And also I think people wrongly think that, or maybe they rightly think, if they deny the plan or deny somebody something, that insurer is going to hire them again for a subsequent assessment. Right? Repeat business.
And they keep their job.
But the problem is the economical piece that was in my article was, if I keep submitting treatment plans and the insurer doesn't want to fund the service and my own profession says, no, the people don't need the service, eventually I'm just probably going to have to leave the industry. But, I can't handle the frustration. I can't make a living this way. I'm not able to help people. So then I'm not submitting any more plans, which means there's nothing for them to comment on. So I think we really need to advocate for these individuals that are injured. And yes, there's fraud, and yes, there's problems in the industry with people, claiming accidents that didn't necessarily happen or whatever. But when you have someone that's legitimately injured, there's medical documentation that says what their injuries are. You can see that they're struggling. The funding is there to support them. And I think that's a model that we really need to fight for, because, we weren't meant to be in cars, thrown around in cars, hit by cars. And invariably that causes some pretty significant injury. And that's what we want to do, is treat those injuries.
Right. Now you said the word fight, and people think, law firm will fight for you. I mean, is there somewhere in the legal realm, like we're sitting in a law firm right now, maybe you can tell some lawyers that are watching what they could do better, or maybe how they could help?
Well, I think it's gotten to the point in the industry where everybody needs to be represented. It used to be that you could very easily work with the insurers on situations, but somewhere along the line that sort of murky water has just been all muddled together. And now you need to have someone on your side to fight these disputes. Because if the insurance exam says, no, you don't need the treatment, then the lawyer can mediate that decision and try to overturn it. So I can't imagine an individual who's disabled trying to fight that fight on their own. I think the lawyers, though, really need to be looking seriously at who's providing these assessments. And I had another situation this week where the lawyer stopped an assessment because the assessor was not qualified as per their CV. They didn't have a background in brain injury. So the lawyer didn't feel they were the most appropriate assessor to see my client. And, just said to the insurer, I'd just like somebody with experience in brain injury to conduct this assessment. Now, that didn't go well in the way that the insurer said, well, then the client's declining to attend and he's not getting services.
I'm sorry.
I know. It's frustrating.
This is crazy. I mean, if the person has a brain injury
yeah,
and the occupational therapist, say you comes in for it and you're assessing their needs or whatever, and you have experience with brain injury.
Yeah.
And then they send an occupational therapist who has no experience in brain injury.
Yeah.
And they're allowed to.
Yeah. Well, and in that case, the assessment didn't even get completed. So maybe they would have looked and said, wow, yeah, what Julie's doing is great. That needs to continue. But I guess the lawyer didn't want to risk what the outcome of that could have been. So all they were asking for was just an assessment by somebody qualified. And the insurer, I don't know what the rules are, but apparently they don't necessarily have to, look at the credentials that closely, because an occupational therapist is an occupational therapist in writing and through our college, but really we do have different skills. It's like me going to, a knee surgeon who says I need a knee replacement, and then I ask for a second opinion from a shoulder surgeon. It's not apples to apples. So I think it's fair to look at the CV. I think it's fair to look at who's going to be doing the assessment. And then I think it's really important that after the assessment, the client have the opportunity to comment on the report or the experience. I have a lot of clients that I'll say, email me when they leave and let me know how it went.
Right.
And a lot of times the emails are quite concerning, and they made me feel like I was, lying. They made me feel like my injuries aren't valid. It's just that feeling that they weren't treated fairly. And that's unfortunate, because I do these assessments, like I said, and I always want the client to know that I am here for them. Even though something's in dispute, my plan is to try and support their needs. And so let's just go through it and we'll see, how it goes. And I explain my findings to them before I leave. That's very transparent practice. And I give them the opportunity to ask questions. And, but again, that comes with experience. And I think the longer you do any job, the more confident you are having those discussions.
You made a few waves with the article, and I know at the speech that I saw you give, a lot of people there were quite happy with what you were talking about.
Sure.
Just briefly while we wrap up, what's some reaction? Where do you see this going forward? Or do you think it'll just, well, she said that, let's just keep it status quo?
Yeah, I mean, I think some people in my own profession were a little upset that someone with, my level of experience, and I have some respect in the industry, would sort of throw that out there and sort of pin this us against them kind of concept. But my goal was just to sort of have people look at the big picture and kind of, let's just understand again where we're coming from here. What are our ethical requirements through our college? What are the economical implications of what we're doing? And it's about people's treatment. Someone said, you're just saying that people should approve my plan so I have a job. Yeah, I love my job, love to keep my job, but it's really more about people getting treatment.
Right.
I strongly believe in the profession of occupational therapy. We do wonderful things. We're one of the only professions that looks at physical, cognitive, and emotional disability. And I believe that we can help people. And I just don't want my own profession to lose sight of that, because we do great things. So there was some people that were a little bit, Julie, that was a little bold. And other people were really happy that it was voiced so strongly at what's going on. There was one gentleman that sent me a few emails whose wife was in a car accident, had a brain injury. And he was so pleased to see someone finally pointing the finger in the right direction at, professionals taking accountability for the decisions of their own profession and trying to solve those problems. So if I reached out to one or two people and made them think, then it served its purpose. And it's not easy throwing yourself out there. And I'm going to be speaking again about this in September at our provincial conference, more from the element of how do we solve this problem? Because now the other thing that's happening is, for example, if a case manager wants to employ the services of a rehab therapist, normally occupational therapists sign those treatment plans. And now these case managers are saying, well, I'm going to get the speech therapist to sign the plan because they're a lot more friendly in an insurance exam. So people are now trying to find a way to sort of work around us because they're afraid of what these assessments are going to say. And it's too bad. It shouldn't be that way.
And I'm anticipating another article is going to be coming out about
You know what? The one gentleman asked me to write a sequel. I could go on. But, I don't know. It takes a lot of time to put your thoughts together and like I said, to throw yourself out there. And, I'm an MBA student part-time and I have a family. So, you have to really be careful of how you spend your time. But I've written for that magazine before and I probably will again. But eventually people get sick of hearing from me, maybe.
Nonsense. We loved hearing from you today. Quick plug. Entwistle Health Solutions, contact, what?
www.entwistlehealth.com.
Okay.
No H in Entwistle. And, we're just an occupational therapy firm providing occupational therapy services. So
excellent. And a wonderful speaker.
Thank you.
Make sure you invite her to come and speak. That's all the time we have now. Thanks a lot, Julie, for coming by.
Problem.
Very educational and kind of frightening in a way.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
We'll see what happens going forward.
Okay.
And join us next time at Pace Law Firm, pacelawfirm.com. Bye for now.